morning. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the August meeting of the Commission to Combat Substance Use Disorder. We will hold on the meeting minutes until we have quorum. But before I introduce our first speaker this morning, I'd like to share a few updates on the opioid settlement front. Today, and actually right now, we are notifying 20 organizations that they have been awarded a combined $5.5 million to expand the peer workforce. This funding is in response to 80 proposals received after FSSA's Division of Mental Health and Addiction released a request for funding in May. Due to the high demand and the necessity for competitive salaries and benefits, no organization received full funding for their request. Using the state's 35% abatement share of opioid settlement funds, this initiative funds 63 peer positions across 61 counties in Indiana. Award notices are going out right now, with contracts starting October 1st and running through September 30th of 2026. The complete list of awardees is available at in.gov/recovery/settlement. Additionally, we launched our annual reporting cycle this morning for local units of government. Indiana Code requires all 648 local units of government that have received opioid settlement funds to report their funds annually to the Family and Social Services Administration. These reports are then compiled into a comprehensive report submitted to the legislature by October 1st of each year. Last year, in our first reporting cycle encompassing 6 months, we received 606 of 648 reports. Of these, 81% of communities reported no action taken with their abatement funds in the initial 6 months. We anticipate this number to change significantly this year, as communities have now had over a year and a half to develop their plans. To facilitate the reporting process, we have partnered with a team of consultants and engineers at Aegis to develop a user-friendly electronic reporting system and to assist local entities in navigating the process. Our goal is to achieve a 100% response rate. Counties and municipalities have until September 6th at 11:59 p.m. to file their reports. With that, I'd like to introduce our recovery speaker, Lindsay Huff. Lindsay joins us with nearly 11 years in recovery and 10 years of professional experience working in the addiction field as a peer. She currently serves as a client recovery advisor at Aware Recovery Care, and some of you may recognize Lindsay from our Know the Facts campaign. Lindsay?
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Lindsay Huff, and to say it's an honor to be here is truly an understatement. I am a person living in long-term recovery from IV heroin use and meth use, and truly just a poor self-image. I grew up in a loving home with parents that were smart and truly striving towards the American dream. Despite this, it is a known fact that addiction is a family disease, and it heavily impacted my loved ones. In the summer of 2003, my brother overdosed and died. I would identify this as the point in my life where the struggles really began. For me, the statement of addiction being a progressive disease hits home because it all happened so incredibly fast. Marijuana use turned to cocaine use, and this quickly made its way to IV heroin and meth use. In 2011, I had a drug-induced seizure and was placed on life support for 7 days. When I came back from near death, my heart was whole when I saw my mother and my sister's faces again. They have truly been the two that have seen this journey from the beginning. Despite what one would consider being a life-changing moment, I returned to use for 2 more years. Due to the impacts of the seizure, I was supported in finding the resources I needed to maintain a day-to-day way of living. I was approved for Social Security, disability, food stamps, and Medicaid. I was also introduced to an amazing organization called Adult and Child, where my real healing began. After 12 rehab programs from the age of 13 to 23 years old, and several stays within the Community North Psychiatric Pavilion, I finally got to a place in my life that I could no longer continue to live this lifestyle, and truly the only way that I knew how to live. With Adult and Child's help, support, and programs of therapy, IOP, care coordination, medication-assisted treatment, psychiatry, and peer support, I started to discover that I could not only live a different lifestyle, but I could live a purpose-filled life. After 1 year of recovery, my peer support professional, assigned to my case, made the statement to me, and I will never forget it. She said, "Lindsay, you could do what I do, and you could be really good at it." I don't think she will ever understand the true impact of her kind words. It was so incredibly important for me to be able to see someone who came from similar circumstances and was able to turn it all around for herself. She saw my true potential as a person, something that I myself could not see at that time. She assisted me in getting certified as a peer in 2014, and this is where my life really began again. Everyone thinks that recovery is just stopping the use of substances, but for me, that is just the start. Recovery is about finding and becoming the person that you were always meant to be before you got lost in your addiction, the person that you were just always meant to be. Following my certification, I became employed, and during my time in the field, I've worked for 4 different organizations in Indianapolis. The thing I discovered during this time was that my love for people is so strong. I am genuinely pulled in my everyday life to believe in you and provide you with the resources until you yourself are able to believe in yourself again. The profound meaning of life is understanding that everyone in this world holds value. This is the exceptional impact of peer support. In my view, empathy and understanding only comes through going through hard things in life. And if you want me to be completely honest, whether you struggle with addiction or not, we are all going through hard things. Everyone in this room is experiencing adversity in some way. So I believe if we as a community could understand this, then status and financial gain would no longer be the goals of our society. Inclusion and finding similarities rather than differences could really drive us forward. I slowly began to climb the corporate ladder. I gained an understanding of the necessity of a treatment team, and to be honest with you, some of my best friends today are licensed clinical social workers or working towards that goal. However, the true understanding of how impactful the role of peer support is has gotten lost within our organizations. This came to a full understanding for me when I was told there would be no supervisor position available for me because life experience would never equate to a college degree. The world had just not caught up yet. From that time to now, I have sat back and watched and waited for the opportunities for growth within this industry. Why are there limited opportunity for peers to be supervising peers? In my experience, I have found that my ability rise from the depths of addiction and near death only came to fruition when someone with similar experiences understood me and believed in me. Today, I am living a fulfilled life. I got married in 2020 to my high school sweetheart who had viewed my entire addiction struggle and sadly had to walk away shortly before my seizure. After I had 4 years of recovery, he reached out and told me he wanted closure on our relationship. We now have a 3-month-old son who is his daddy's spitting image and an arrogant cat who strolls with us on Sunday walks. I was so grateful for this After that, the first meeting, we never looked back. Okay. My best friend, whose support has guided me through my darkest moments that came with my entire recovery journey. My mother and sister sat with me bedside when I woke from my coma, are uplifted as they view my impact in this world. Today, my mother is on hospice, and I now have the opportunity to provide her with the resources and services she did for me so long ago. I have found the meaning behind my struggle, and not just that, I have found my life's purpose and calling. I believe in people to a fault, and those that I call friends know that if they need anything in this life, I will be there to cheer, cry, and most importantly, make laugh through any life struggle. I continue to work as a peer because I never want to lose my roots, but also facilitate trainings now through Mental Health of America to get certified as a peer as well. In my professional experience, peers with the right education and credentialing hold just as much insight and drive to supervise others because remember, everyone holds value. As I close today, let me stand not only as a representation of Lindsay Huff, but as a representation for every peer support professional and most importantly, everyone who is actively using substances today. Sometimes the hardest paths can develop the most profound leaders. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, for sharing your story and using your experiences to aid others in their recovery. In May, key stakeholders and community leaders gathered at Lucas Oil Stadium for the unveiling of the Playbook for Enhancing Indiana's Mental Health and Behavioral Health Workforce. The Playbook, developed by the team of researchers at the Bowen Center for Health, Workforce Research and Policy, and funded by the Lilly Endowment, and you think my title's long, offers a comprehensive analysis of the post-secondary pipeline and identifies strategies to bolster our state's behavioral health workforce. I've invited Dr. Hannah Maxey, Director of the Bowen Center, to present the findings and discuss the critical steps we need to take as a state to meet the demand and services. Hannah?
Thank you so much, and thank you, Commission members. It's an honor to be here today, although I have to say it is a hard act to follow the footsteps of a hero who has lived experience and is contributing boots on the ground to addressing substance use in our communities. I'm excited to be here with you today to speak to recommendations and the project that is the Playbook for Enhancing Indiana's Mental and Behavioral Health Workforce. Before we dive into the findings and recommendations, I just want to level set us on this conversation and why I believe it is critically important to conversations related to combating substance use here in the state of Indiana. I know that each of you represents an organization or entity or perspective that is making contributions or committed to that mission. We just heard an individual in our state who has arisen from the ashes of substance use to make impact in our community. And along the way and the pathway of her recovery were healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, addiction professionals that helped her along that path, including, of course, very importantly, the peer worker that really helped provide a North Star for her. Today, the Playbook is very much focused on the clinical workforce in mental and behavioral health. And of course, that workforce directly contributes to care for people with substance use disorders and co-occurring conditions. The Playbook is focused on a workforce of individuals that have graduate training, either a master's or higher, and their entire practice and clinical focus is dedicated to mental, behavioral health, or substance use disorder treatment. So when I'm speaking today, I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware this includes all of our behavioral health and human services, clinical counselor licensees, licensed clinical social workers, licensed mental health counselors, licensed clinical addiction counselors, licensed marriage family therapists, that's a lot of words, and then of course our clinical psychologists as well as our psychiatrists. The Playbook was sponsored by Lilly Endowment, and I wanted to start by just sharing Lilly Endowment's interest in the project and the focus. Lilly Endowment recognizes, and of course we all recognize, that untreated mental illness, behavioral health and wellness of our communities, there is a huge army of folks that have to be involved in that. So I want to preface it with, while this project is focused on those clinical professionals in mental and behavioral health care services and psychiatric services, that is not stating that other professionals aren't critically important. We know, of course, that primary care professionals are contributing to these services, as well as social services professionals and various other professionals in other sectors here in our state are making contributions. Lilly Endowment, however, said, we need to really focus in. We won't be able to solve the whole problem, but let's look at a portion of the workforce. These clinical professionals that can provide both diagnosis, medication management, as well as clinical counseling services are the definitive care that can be provided to these folks. Many of the organizations you represent are very well aware of this, that we have a shortage of these professionals that is limiting access to care for folks that need those definitive, comprehensive clinical treatment and services. So that is why the scope of this project was narrowed to these professionals. Further, we could start by looking all the way back at K-12 and what are we doing to recruit our young people and engage them in interest in pursuing these professions, all the way through the practicing workforce and where they're at in communities and what is driving some of our shortages in specific communities. That is also a very large conversation and very complex. Lilly Endowment took a step back and said, where can we zone in on to really do an assessment and planning and recommendation development? And it was decided that this project would focus on post-secondary education pipeline through full clinical independent practice for these professionals. We have a lot of very strong higher education institutions in the state of Indiana that are preparing folks with the degrees that qualify them or potentially qualify them to apply for licensure in these fields in the state of Indiana. And there are lots of investments made in those post-secondary institutions. Lilly Endowment really wanted to understand what is the landscape of training and of degrees for these professionals. What are the outcomes from those training programs? Meaning, where are those people going when they graduate? Are they going into the workforce? What are the next steps beyond that to get into full independent practice? What I want to state very importantly is, for these professionals that we're speaking of, they require graduate training, either a master's or a doctoral degree, and then after their degree, they require years of clinical experience before they can become independent clinicians and practitioners in our state. So this study was looking at the whole pipeline to full independent practice, including degree, including the postgraduate clinical experience phase, and all the way through independent practice. So I wanted to set that up right away. The Playbook project itself, the first question that Lilly Endowment asked was, hey, you have been identified to us as the state expert in health workforce, so could you please share with us what does the landscape of our training look like? Where do we have degree programs? That inventory did not exist prior to this project, and so I'm going to be going through and talking about the outcomes of this project. What the Playbook involved for the assessment piece was understanding, number one, what is the landscape of post-secondary degree programs in the state of Indiana, preparing people for these professions, so the education environment, and then separately, what does our occupational regulatory environment look like with regards to the education requirements and with regards to that clinical experience requirement before they can go into full licensed practice. So we did a deep dive on education, we did a deep dive on regulation, and I want to make sure that I don't underscore the collaboration with state agencies, including the Professional Licensing Agency, who partnered and helped to champion the regulatory review component of this study, and also contributed to the development of the education landscape with the Commission for Higher Education. So without the support and collaboration of both the Commission for Higher Education and the Professional Licensing Agency, this project and the resulting playbook that you have in front of you would not have been possible. After the assessment, we actually did a lot of engagement with folks. We reached out to more than 150 Indiana academic leaders that are heading up these degree programs in the state of Indiana to do pulse checks and focus groups with them to identify what is going on with regards to your application trends, your enrollment trends. Where are your students going when they graduate? What do you see as the challenges to maintaining your programs or growing your programs to help us grow the workforce for Indiana? We also reached out with the collaboration of the Professional Licensing Agency to licensees themselves with an anonymous survey, asking them to share their perspective and experience with regards to their education. How prepared do they feel to come out into practice after their degree program? What was their experience with obtaining clinical supervision and going on to their full independent license? And were they interested in making contributions to training the next generation of their colleagues? And then finally, we engaged very deeply with various types of employers, including our community mental health centers, our hospitals and health systems that offer behavioral health services as well. And then we did broad stakeholder engagement and had an event at Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm going to be going through now with you the quick high-level findings and also the recommendations, and just highlighting specific actions that I think may be particularly relevant, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions if you all have any. I do want to make you aware very quickly of one of the assets that was created as part of this project. That is a county-level needs assessment. This is available on the Bowen portal. That is the Bowen Center's website. And I guess just very quickly for you all to be aware, the Bowen Center for Health Workforce Research and Policy, is a state academic partnership. We do receive foundational funding through the Department of Health to support healthcare workforce reporting on a biennial basis. That does include some behavioral health professions. But we maintain a website called the Bowen Portal, where all of the resources that we prepare for the state of Indiana are publicly accessible. So I did want to make sure that the commissioners and commission members are aware of that. This slide is just a dashboard that we created specifically for the Lilly Endowment Project. This dashboard is a county-level needs assessment that takes into account each county in Indiana, the behavioral health workforce and mental health workforce and various resources at the county level that exist, as well as certain population demand indicators to rank or rate our counties based on the resources that they have to address population needs and demand within that county. I just wanted to make you all aware that this is a resource that may be of interest to the commission. And we are always looking for feedback and thoughts on how we can add layers or information that might be helpful to create resolutions. So we are always seeking feedback on these tools. I'm going to dive right into the findings and recommendations. The recommendations are broke up into 4 categories with a 5th general additional considerations. I'm going to go through them one at a time. As I do, and as you might flip through the document that you have in front of you today, you'll notice that there are some icons, and you'll see them at the bottom of the slide. Academic leaders, policymakers, individuals, funders, and employers. Those icons are used throughout the document to identify where certain perspectives might take action steps to move these recommendations forward. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of those. We're going to dive right in to secure the pipeline. So I referenced Lilly Endowment said, hey, Hannah, can you share with us the map that shows us where all of our degree programs are located and how many they're enrolling and how many they're graduating? That did not exist prior to this project and the work that was done with the Commission for Higher Ed and the PLA. As a result of this project, we now have a dashboard. That dashboard is also available on the Bowen portal. That does plot every degree program in the state of Indiana that maps to licenses as verified by the respective boards at the PLA as qualifying or potentially qualifying based on courses and course content for degree programs. The map you're looking at today basically shows and plots those for you. This is a resource to identify where we have training deserts as a state, or communities that lack any resources or degree programs to train folks up. The findings from this assessment, we have training deserts in our state. Also, very importantly, we have numerous degree programs that have closed over the last several years. They have shuttered their doors. Now, I am saying this, but I want to preface it with, we still have seen enrollment increases. Those enrollment increases are due to the rapid expansion of remote online learning programs. I have been asked whether or not those remote online learning programs, the enrollment in those programs, represents our Hoosiers doing remote online learning in our state. That is not something that we were able to identify in the 12-month course of this project. Later on, you'll see one of the recommendations calls for a complete assessment of the impact of remote online learning expansion here in Indiana on our workforce development here as a state. But I do want to share with you that our institutions have closed degree programs that are in person. Although we've seen enrollment increases, those enrollment increases are largely remote online learning programs. Some of our degree programs are reporting decreased student interest, decreased applications, and decreased enrollment. I want to make sure you understand that is not all, that is some. Some of the programs are, that is primarily behavioral health and human services degree programs. We also, this year, lost 3 residency slots for psychiatry in the state of Indiana that were grant funded, and the grant funding was discontinued for those slots. No additional source of funding was identified. Those 3 slots will not be moved forward and filled. In the last decade, or several decades, we've made great strides to expand our psychiatry residency capacity as a state, so the loss of 3 slots is not good for the state of Indiana. Additionally, it was identified that we have limited in-state opportunities for our doctorally trained psychologists pursuing clinical psychology to complete their clinical internships here within our state. We are losing talent to do clinical internships out of state where they generally stay and practice post-graduation. So the shortage of clinical internship opportunities is limiting our in-state retention of our clinical doctorally prepared psychologists. Finally, the degree programs reported across the board with all of these degree programs mapping to these professions that recruiting and retaining faculty is a significant challenge, and that financial support is desperately needed to be able to keep faculty in roles so that they can grow programs and increase class size. Students, or our licensees now, reported that the cost of their education to be exorbitant, and that the salaries and the wages that they are making when they are out working in the field, especially in roles and positions that are serving our underserved in Indiana, do not make it feasible for them to continue practicing in those environments while paying back their student loans and then also having sufficient income for their families. All of these are contributing to the workforce crisis within our state. Some of the recommendations regarding securing the pipeline that I just want to highlight for you. The first is keeping a finger on the pulse of the workforce and on the pulse of the pipeline to practice. This type of analysis cannot be a one and done, or a decade from now, I will be briefing another commission or this commission on the crisis that we are having within our workforce. So the top recommendation is that there be an intentional discussion and resources dedicated to ensuring that we can keep a finger on this and that this is not a one and done assessment. The next is we need to focus on growing our own, although that was not the focus of this project, very clearly with the reporting of decreased interest, decreased applications, and decreased enrollment in certain degree programs. It is very important that our youth know about the opportunities in these fields, and those that might have a personal or mission match are encouraged to explore these professions. The next is addressing training deserts. You saw the map on the preceding slide. We have communities that don't have degree program capacity. Of course, we have remote online learning and hybrid programs. Those deserts might be opportunities for expanding degree programs or expanding clinical training partnerships to get students in our degree programs into those communities where they can complete clinical training and potentially see themselves going into practice once they graduate. Expedited training pathways is the next recommendation. In the last legislative session, Senate Enrolled Act 8 it authorized our institutions to create bachelor's degree in 3 options and opportunities for Indiana degree programs as appropriate. Expanding the number of 4+1 degree programs where an individual can complete a bachelor's degree and also a master's degree in 4+1 year. There are degree program pathways for several of these degrees where there are 4+1 opportunities. Expanding those opportunities would help expedite people through the pipeline. And so this was another recommendation that was identified. There may be opportunities for our General Assembly to consider whether this would be something similar to Senate Enrolled Act 8 and an opportunity for the state of Indiana to encourage higher ed to explore opportunities similarly. The next recommendation, which I think goes without saying, is we must stabilize our psychiatry residencies. The loss of 3 slots, when we have worked so hard to expand psychiatry in the state of Indiana, has to be addressed. I would encourage the commission to discuss this or to go back to your organizations and entities and see how we might ensure that we can have a sustainable source of funding for our psychiatry residency positions as a state. Expanding psychology clinical internships will also be important to securing and retaining our talent in state. There are opportunities for both public and private sector funding to be directed to clinical internship opportunities and opportunities for our employers that would have psychology or psychiatric programs to explore the development or expansion of clinical internships for doctoral psychology trainees. The last recommendation for securing the pipeline is pipeline incentives. We do have some loan repayment programs. Those are programs that offer loan repayment, generally for some type of service obligation. Those are run through the Indiana Department of Health, and they are run through a federal match program, our state loan repayment program. Those programs are focused on practicing clinicians in the field and are absolutely critically important, but we do not, as a state, at the state level, have any incentive programs focused on incentivizing faculty, individuals in faculty positions. There are several examples that you will find in the Playbook report of states that have these state-level programs and provisions in place, offering loan repayment to faculty in targeted positions to support recruitment and retention of faculty. Finally, scholarship programs are needed to offset the cost of education for folks that are going into these degrees and then going in and serving our public, and especially targeting our underserved communities and students that would be serving there. The next set of recommendations is focused on strengthening clinical training. So we focused on securing our pipeline. This is now focused on clinical training. There are 2 pieces of clinical training where there are recommendations. The first, individuals going through these degree programs, whether they are training to be a clinical social worker, a mental health counselor, a clinical psychologist, or a psychiatrist, all of these folks complete clinicals during their training in their degree. There is also clinical experience post-degree that is required. Of course, for our psychiatrists, that is a psychiatry residency. For our psychologists, there are psychology internships. For our master's trained clinical counselors, there is a minimum of 2 years of clinical supervised experience required before the individuals can obtain licensure. These recommendations focus both on clinical training during degree and clinical training post-degree while completing clinical requirements for licensure. The assessment component of the clinical training environment identified that we have, not surprisingly, shortages of clinical training experiences for folks to complete while they are in their degree program. And we have shortages of clinical supervisors in the field who are willing to have the people who graduate, especially our master's clinical counselors or individuals working toward clinical counseling. There are severe shortages of licensed individuals willing to serve as clinical supervisors for the master's degreed folks completing clinical supervision. I want to share with you, because I think this is very important, the Behavioral Health and Human Services licensees who received the anonymous survey from the PLA reported this to be a significant challenge and barrier to successfully completing all of the requirements to become a clinical counselor in the state of Indiana. We had individuals report that they are personally out-of-pocket paying individuals to provide them with clinical supervision hours. That would be akin to a medical resident paying their faculty to provide them with clinical guidance, mentorship, and instruction while they are in residency. So it is no wonder that we have a severe shortage of clinical counselors when people go through a graduate degree program, are paying back student loans, and then are in some cases having to pay to complete the clinical supervision that's required for them to qualify for their independent license in the state of Indiana. The last key finding from our clinical training environment is that our licensees reported they don't feel that they are aware of effective techniques to even serve as clinical supervisors. So the PLA partnership survey that was sent out to PulseCheck asked individuals, especially those behavioral health and human services licensees, if they serve as a clinical supervisor and what the barriers were if they did not. Many reported they did not feel that they were aware of effective techniques or what it would take to be a clinical supervisor. So these are some of the top findings. The recommendations here, obviously expanding clinical experiences within our state. When you scroll through the document and you look through the recommendations, we as a state have built and have invested in capacity to support clinical partnerships and advanced clinical training. One such program is the Area Health Education Centers. There may be opportunities to leverage existing programs to help expand clinical training opportunities or coordination of those opportunities within the state. The next recommendation is elevating professional supervisors and professional supervision. Addressing that clinical supervision period is absolutely important if we are going to grow our clinical counseling workforce as a state. And I want to underscore that evidence-based substance use treatment includes clinical counseling. And so this is very important and I think pertinent to the commission, is addressing this shortage of clinical supervisors and elevating individuals in our state willing to serve in roles of clinical supervision. One of the recommendations coming out of this that we have already received feedback on from stakeholders is regarding formalization of clinical supervision. To date, Indiana does not have a formalized pathway for clinical supervisors to recognize them or formalized state-recognized training for individuals that would serve in clinical supervision capacity. The recommendation, there are several options set forth. Our team at the Bowen Center has been continuing to do stakeholder engagement, and stakeholders are highly and largely pointing to the development of a formalized credential or endorsement recognizing our clinical supervisors, as well as either identifying a state training for clinical supervisors or developing a straight training for clinical supervisors. What I want to say is we can't expect folks to do this and take away from their productivity and clinical practice time without addressing incentives. It will be critically important that as we move to formalize clinical supervision in our state, that we also recognize the individuals that are willing to step forward and serve in this role and incentivize them. You will see in the playbook there is also a recommendation with state examples of tax credits as an incentive for individuals that are formally serving and can document their service in these clinical supervisor capacities. And so that goes to the incentivizing clinical training, which is the last recommendation. Recommendation number 3 is aligning education, policy, and practice. Some of the key findings in this, licensees and education programs reported challenges and some confusion and complexity with regards to licensing requirements, especially with regards to our clinical counselors and our behavioral health and human services licensees. We also identified opportunities where training could be better aligned with the practice opportunities for certain professionals, and I'll go into that with the recommendation. And then finally, that there were key opportunities and state-level initiatives related to evidence-based practice and the expansion of evidence-based practice in the state, specifically our adoption of CCBHC as a state, which will align with promoting evidence-based practice, and other organizations working to promote and advance evidence-based practice, including, of course, Riley Children's Hospital in our state. The recommendations with aligned education, policy, and practice. The first is staffing support for alignment. The Behavioral Health and Human Services Board, licensees reported, that was where licensees reported challenges with applications, the complexity with education, because if you go on to the Bowen portal, you will see there are many different degree programs that could potentially qualify people in Indiana for certain of our behavioral health licenses. However, you have to take specific courses. In some cases, your course curricula has to be reviewed to make sure you have the specific course content to qualify for license. As you can imagine, those processes are complex and extremely onerous for the board to do. And there is precedent from other boards, specifically the nursing board, where there is a dedicated individual that provides staffing support to the board, specifically for education, transcript review, and to support alignment with academic institutions and education. So one FTE at the PLA, new, established, dedicated to the Behavioral Health and Human Services Board to support that was recommended. Ensuring evidence-based practice was also recommended. The recommendation implementation actions out of this are an assessment and understanding the extent of evidence-based practice in our degree programs as a state, and where opportunities exist within academic degree programs to shore that up. The second recommendation, action implementation, is regarding the potential to add a time-limited 2-credit-hour CE course for certain license types, like behavioral health and human services licensees, specific to evidence-based practice. Now, I recognize 2 hours is in no way sufficient to ensure people could have any knowledge of evidence-based practice. However, to ensure that individuals who have been licensed for significant periods of time in our state are aware of the movement towards evidence-based practice and apprised of the latest or state adopted through the CCBHC evidence-based practices, something like this may be implemented to ensure that our licensees are up to date. There has been precedent for this several years ago. There was a 2-credit-hour CE addition for our controlled substance prescribers related to opioid prescribing. There was sunset provision on that, but I do believe that that was helpful to ensure that everyone was updated on the latest. So this may be an opportunity for Indiana. The final recommendation is assessing the school-based behavioral health workforce. I know that all of us here today are very well aware of the crisis among our youth. I think the latest statistics are an estimated 50% of our adolescents that have untreated mental illness will go on to struggle with substance use disorder at some point in their lives. Ensuring that we are reaching our young people where they are at with mental and behavioral health services is absolutely critical to support prevention of substance use here in the state of Indiana. We attempted to include an analysis of the school-based behavioral health workforce. Unfortunately, there is very little information to date on the school-based behavioral health workforce and how they may be involved in providing services for children at the state level, statewide. And so this recommendation is calling for a state assessment of school-based behavioral health workforce with recommendations. I am delighted to report the Department of Education is currently working with us to develop and implement a pulse survey that will go out to our K-12 programs across the state to do a pulse check. However, resources will be needed in order to support a complete assessment and recommendations of school-based behavioral health in the state of Indiana, and that is outlined within the report. The final, just additional recommendations that didn't really fall under those categories, but were critical and identified by stakeholders as important. I'm just going to gloss over them quickly for you. One is reviewing model legislation for the professions that were included that was out of scope for this, but is an opportunity potentially for Indiana. Playbooks for other workforces. So out of scope was primary care, behavioral health integration. We know that's critically important. There can be playbooks for other workforces and deep dives, including potentially the substance use disorder treatment and prevention workforce. An aid and wage study is also recommended. Outside of the scope of this was looking at reimbursements for behavioral health services and mental health services in the state and how that ties to wage. That is out of scope for this, but is a recommendation. Aligning psychology policy and modernizing it with national recommendations for psychology. Emerging workforce models, so I know we heard on peers, many states are moving to create and formalize behavioral health paraprofessional roles. As a state, we have not done that. That may be an opportunity for the state of Indiana. Improving transition from degree to licensure is another opportunity. And then finally, assessing and ensuring that we are keeping a finger on the impact of the expansion of remote online learning on workforce development in Indiana is critically important. I'll leave you all with moving the ball down the field, so just playing on the theme of the playbook to share with you just some things that we are working on now and we are seeking partnership on. The first is dissemination to gain momentum. Through our partnership with Lilly Endowment on the project, there is a press package that is available to support dissemination of the playbook. We appreciate greatly all the work that has been done to disseminate. If anyone is interested, I would be happy to make the press package available to them. We are also working to develop what I'm calling special teams champions, and specifically looking for champions to step forward and carry the ball with legislative initiatives, funding initiatives, and organizationally. We have several folks, organizations, and champions that have already stepped forward. But of course, this is a big problem and there is no silver bullet. So it will take all of us working where we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Questions?
I got a quick one. I never know how to do this, Mr. Chairman.
It's always on.
There you go. Maybe that's why I never got it to work. My name is Dan Evans. I used to work at IU Health, so I was the one providing incentives to people to do the training. And ran into two big things, time and reduction in clinical productivity. So Adam Smith's at work. So unless you can deal with Mr. Smith, you won't get folks, especially in my opinion, sole practitioners who really have no leverage in their practice in these underserved areas. I'm just looking at Clinton County, where I spent a lot of time in Clinton County. It would be almost impossible to so I just say, so here's my real question though. All these data are not newsflash. But they're very well organized, so thank you for that. And I'm sitting here thinking about Governor Bowen, who I had the pleasure of working with and for in 1976, and then again in 1985, when he was Secretary of HHS. These were the issues. I can feel him right now in the room passionately talking about these issues, especially in German Township, Marshall County. Can't you? I mean, literally the same issues, and that's when he ran the place, so to speak. So my question is, what I've discovered is what you know, but what seems to me to be understudied is retention. You get somebody into these jobs, you train them, you coach them, you forgive some of their debt, you help, you give them a bear hug, and then arrivederci. Good luck. So I know the turnover is 50%, so you can't build a workforce. So I wonder if a second phase of this or whatever would be a toolbox for retention of these really hard-working people. I'm talking about retention both of the recently trained behavioral health workers and their mentors, clinical partners, because they both, seems to me, they burn out. I talked to 3 yesterday who work in Lebanon, and they were just burned out. They couldn't do it anymore. They were done. And they are paid way more than the numbers in your report. Some of them twice as much as the numbers. That's what the problem with these averages. There's some that are paid really high. So I just would encourage you to give leaders of the community mental health organizations tools for retention, because they're suffering. And my second, that was a speech, not a question, so I apologize for that. Was it a question? I suppose I could put a question mark at the end of it, so it's a rhetorical question. The second one is a question. Why not emphasize collaboration of post-secondary leaders rather than suggest it? That's the engine, and they don't, I deny this if quoted, they don't collaborate very well because in fact they compete with each other. These students bring money with them, and so they're competing because the workforce isn't big enough to satisfy all the supply side of the educational enterprise. So what thoughts do you have, if none today, later, about could we double production if the universities and Ivy Tech and the online places collaborated and shared teaching expertise in a way that filled these voids? Like Ivy Tech is just up the block from Frankfurt. It's not very far away, but Clinton County showed as a desert. It's really not, because you drive, 3 miles to 52 and 2 miles up and you are in. You're at the Ivy Tech campus. From Mulberry, Indiana, you're there, but we've characterized them as a desert when they're really not. So is it an access issue? I mean, is it a money issue? My kind of semi-rhetorical question is, you can't pray for these people to collaborate.
Nope, you got it. You have to you do it with a carrot or you do it with a stick. So let me just share with you, as part of this project, we brought degree programs across institutions together. And I want to share with you, they responded to pulse check surveys, they attended focus group sessions, different institutions coming together. I am not aware of that we have a forum that is doing that consistently, and it's a great idea. I think one of the recommendations should be the establishment of a forum for our higher ed institutions to come together routinely to hear and discuss collaboratively solutions. I will share with you that the recommendations here, there were recommendations, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to go into everything, about institutional collaboration.
Well, I saw that.
Yeah, and much of that is intra-institutional, but we had extra between institution, discussion, and collaboration to create these recommendations. I believe if we had a forum and brought the institutions together to discuss these things, that would help move us toward coordination and then hopefully move us toward collaboration, as opposed to creating something to require that. potentially some type of forum that could be established could help with that. What I do want to share, I just want to address your non-question first. The original proposal to Lilly Endowment.
Is this rebuttal or survey?
The original proposal to Lilly Endowment was cradle to grave. It included all the way from early pipeline K-12 assessment to what was going on, all the way through a full retention assessment, but that would have been a multi-year project, and this was a one-year project. So I believe we do need a retention assessment and likely a early pipeline assessment. That was outside of the scope of this, but we would definitely be open to pursuing that.
Can you tell me, are the psychiatric nurse practitioners included in that psychiatry number that you have in your report?
So under the workforce dashboard, there should be another indicator for second piece, separate from psychiatrists.
Okay, all right, because we typically do the same thing, so that number may be, I'm not sure how many we have in the state of Indiana. I just wanted to bring that. And then the other point is, I understand the need for continuing education, but as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I have board certification, which requires me, if I want to continue my board certification, to have continuing education. And you cannot be credentialed with insurance if you are not board certified. So in making those requirements for you to have that continued training, I think we need to realize that if you're certified, you kind of already have that in place. And I think that might be all that I have. I can tell you that when I was full-time in practice, it was 16 months for a new patient to see me. And it's probably 16 months for me to get a child into psychological testing. So we definitely need help in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much, Hannah. Before we move forward, I want to jump back up, and I know the minutes were distributed prior to the meeting. If there are no changes or corrections, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Dr. Dan? Dan Evans, the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes have been approved. Thank you. So just as equally important as strengthening our behavioral health workforce is equipping our employers across the state in all sectors with knowledge and the tools to support employees that are facing mental health and substance use challenges. Jennifer Fair, Director of the Indiana Chamber's Wellness Council, has been leading training sessions across the state to promote stigma-free, second chance, and recovery-friendly workplaces. So we've invited Jennifer to share her insights and the tools that they've created to support both employers and their employees. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, the Commission, for allowing me the opportunity to share with you some of the work of the Wellness Council of Indiana, and really to provide you some employer insights and really the role that an employer plays in this mental health and substance use conversation, because it's significant. And I also want to acknowledge Lindsay and her conversation is that we all know that people are dealing with things that we just don't see. And as an employer, how powerful it is to maybe give lens and thought to what your employees are walking into their workplace with. Whether it's parent, child, financial, whatever it might be, it's significant. And again, if an employer can respond appropriately, we can get them the support that they need so that those employees can show up to be their best selves every day at work. And that is really the role of the employer when we think about the overall health and well-being of our individuals that we're caring for. So the Wellness Council of Indiana is a 501c3 organization, and we are a subsidiary of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. About 15 years ago, the Indiana Chamber recognized that the health and well-being of our communities was going to be an economic driver for our state. That if we do not have healthy individuals living in our communities, it will be difficult for us to recruit and retain businesses and be the economic driver that we want business to be in our state. So we work with employers to really guide them, meet them where they're at, and really navigate this conversation in a way that can have impact to those individuals that work for these employers. We work with all shapes and sizes of employers across the entire state, and it really is unique, right? Every has a unique aspect that they bring to the culture of their organization. And we help them navigate, what does it look like? What does health and well-being look like in your organization? So at the end of the day, really what we are here to do is to communicate, convene, and connect employers so that individuals can really thrive in the places that they live, work, and play. And we do that through the connection, collaboration, and education, and really help employers evaluate where they're at in their overall health and well-being journey. But I think it's important to really open up the conversation around where do employers sit in this space, and why is it so important? So when we look at the workplaces, we see that 76% of our employees indicate that they're dealing with at least one symptom of mental health issues within their self. So 76%. 84% indicate that their workplace is the cause of that. So when we look at the overall impact of the employers, we can see that we could probably do better. We could probably help these individuals navigate that conversation. And 81% of the individuals are looking for a workplace that will support their overall mental health. So again, I think the employer has an interesting perspective, and as we go through today's conversation, I'll share with you some Indiana-specific information that will really drive this. The other thing is the employee engagement. When we look at employee engagement, 31% are engaged in the workplace. 31% of our employees are engaged. 52% are quietly quitting. They are ready to make the move to another organization. And again, if we look at that last slide, it was 81% are looking for a place that will help take care of them and their mental health and as they move forward. The other thing that is really important is that employers are the most trusted source of information. Now, employers have lost a little bit of leeway when it comes to trust, but they are trusted more than the government. They're trusted more than other organizations. They're definitely more trusted than the media. So if an employer is a trusted source of information and they have the power within their benefit plans to open up access to care and make sure that they're using model practices, we can help get individuals the care that they need. We can help individuals navigate that conversation. And as an employer, they need to use their voice to really support this messaging. And there are some very specific ways that an employer can help with that. And when we look at the overall sense of the employer, we want them to be authentic in their leadership. We want employers to make those accommodations that are needed and that flexibility that is needed for individuals to get the care that they need. We need the leadership and the CEOs to really come to be their personal selves at work, that there's not a separation in who they are at work or who they are at home. We want them to come together in that very authentic way, because we know that you can't separate mental health and physical health. You come to work with all of it. And we need employers to really leverage that CEO voice. And we see employers in a couple of different places when it comes to leadership and culture. But we see our employers that are willing to make the commitment and be the voice and really be upfront in their own personal struggles, or authentic in just the way that they lead. Do they share that they're going on vacation? Do they share that they're, tuning out for a period of time? Do they indicate that I'm going to catch my kid's soccer game? Or do they expect that everybody's there working extra hours and not using the PTO that is provided them? But when we see employers leading the charge, we know that employees respect and respond to that. So there's a key role with employers in leading this conversation. We need them to provide accurate information. We need to make sure that they are supporting those employee health initiatives, and we need to have them foster that environment of health empowerment. We need them that flexibility is so important. And when we think of the way employers manage manage their workplace. If somebody were to come and say, I need to go get my child into an appointment, a therapy appointment, and they don't have that flexibility, that individual is probably not going to feel very supportive for one, but they're probably not going to be able to show up and be their authentic self at work because they might feel like they had to hide that. And they might have to really not be able to get the care that they need for their child, or they might delay care for their child because they don't have a trusted environment where they can go and ask for that flexibility and those accommodations. But when we look at Indiana, there are some very specific things that I want to bring your attention to. We know that mental health and substance use is impacting our employer population. And we can see that it's absenteeism, productivity, workforce shortages, we're seeing. But we also know that there are some of that discord that happens at the employee level with the arrest. Maybe they're having issues. Maybe they've lost their driving privileges. Maybe they're really caught up in maybe they have to go to an IOP program or get the care that they need. So employers are recognizing that it is impacting their employee base. But this is where it gets interesting, is that employers believe that mental health and substance use is happening in their community. They think it's happening out in their community. Only 8% believe it's happening within their workforce. And when you separate the HR professionals and the C-suite, the CEO specifically, CEOs believe that 3% strongly agree that it's happening within their workforce. We know that it's happening everywhere. And we know that if when the employees come to work, it's either happening to themselves or it's happening to their family members. And those family members, from an employer standpoint, they're on their benefit plan. They're on those employee health plans. And so it's happening in their workplace. And we need them to understand that. The other thing that we know is that employers are using data-informed decisions about 50% of the time. If you were to look at healthcare expenditure from an employer standpoint and the pharmacy expenditure, you would get a pretty good feel for what's happening within your place of business. You don't have to look at the names, you don't have to look at any of that, but you could look at that data and it could tell you how many people are on medications for mental health issues, how many people are accessing mental health care within their benefit plan. But if they don't believe it's happening in their workplace, they're not looking at that data. We also know that in Indiana, employers are more likely to be terminated than they are to get the care that they need in that second chance. We need to change the employer perspective about what they think about substance misuse. We need to let them understand and remove that stigma that's associated with substance misuse in the organization. So when we think 25% are likely to be terminated and just as many are likely to be given a second chance, we can do better than that. We can help these individuals that are struggling with their mental health and substance use disorders to get the care that they need and be in a supportive environment where they can thrive and be their best self. The other thing that I think has been an improvement in the work that we've done is that we do see that employers know and understand that addiction is a disease. They're still out to decide whether or not treatment really works, because we know that that's a challenge. But the piece where we have the opportunity to improve is that only 13% have naloxone in their first aid kit at work. We would love to see that number increased because we know that it saves lives. And we know if we can put naloxone in the same place where they have their AED, where they have their glucagon or their EpiPens, we can make a difference. And so we're training a lot of employers on how to get access to the naloxone based on all the other programs that are available across the state and making sure that they understand why it's important in the workplace. So again, we see that employers understand that their workplace is struggling. 66% indicate that they're comfortable talking to their workplace about mental health and substance use disorders. But what we have also found is that only half of them feel like they have the adequate resources to support individuals, which means that we have half of the companies indicating that they don't know how to support an individual. And if we think about an individual who has approached their supervisor to say, I have a problem, I need help, I need flexibility, I need accommodations, I need time off because I'm struggling with addiction. And that supervisor is not equipped to connect that individual to the resources that are available to them, the likelihood of that individual seeking treatment is slim to none. If it is dismissed at the employer level, and their employer is saying, oh, take a day off, just come back tomorrow, I've got a lot going on in my life too, but we're fine, you're fine. Let's make sure that we train managers and supervisors on how to identify those individuals that are struggling and understand what's available within the workplace that they can lean into and get that support that they need. So that, again, that individual can show up to be their best selves every day at work. The other thing that we see is that 81% of employers indicate that they have an EAP program. That 81% is pretty significant, and it's usually built into their insurance plan. There are some employers that have an employee assistance program that is an add-on to their benefits, which is usually very robust. But we see a national utilization of EAP programs at 5%. And why is that? There are these wonderful programs that allow access to amazing care, but what we hear from employees is that they don't want to be seen within the system as accessing this care. They believe that it's not as, it's probably more transparent than what it actually is, that it's not confidential if they utilize that EAP program. We also know that employers only promote their EAP in most cases at onboarding. So, think about that first time that you were in your job and that first week where you've got all that information about all those healthcare benefits and everything else, and oh yeah, here's your EAP program, and where does that go? Maybe in the circular file, or maybe, it might sit on a shelf. But we need, and what we're working on with employers on right now, is how do they leverage that resource year round? It's like cancer care. You don't need cancer care until you need cancer care. You don't need mental health care. You don't need substance until you need it. And then you need to know where to get it. So making those tools available and really educating employers. So from a wellness council standpoint, we have talked to thousands of employers across the state of Indiana, specifically about mental health and substance use. And we have developed some resources specifically for them to help them really understand what they can do to open up access and improve the overall well-being of their workforce. We do one-on-one consultations with employers to help them understand what do they have within their benefit plan, what can they add, are they limited in their counseling sessions, are they unlimited, is it, do they have 5, do they have 10? Just know what's available. So if a supervisor or manager is asked about, I need help, I need an EAP, know what is available for those individuals. We're also going in and offering the mental health first aid training to employers. That's important because when somebody shows up and they're a little off, and we've done trainings across the state, one of the individuals called after the fact to say, I went through this training last week and I wasn't really sure if I was ever going to use it, but I have to believe that I saved somebody's life today because I understood and I saw the signs and symptoms that maybe previously I wouldn't have seen. And they were able to connect the individuals to those resources and get them the care that they need. So the training and supervisor training is so critically important. We know that the best practice second chance policies are something that we need employers to follow. Just because somebody is failing a drug screen and having challenges and relapse maybe in their recovery, we need them to stand behind that individual and help them get the care that they need. Stigma. Stigma is an issue. And it's not just in stigma, it's the stigma that the individuals have for themselves and asking for the care. It's the stigma that the supervisor or manager may represent when they're approached about getting the care. Sometimes it's the stigma of the physician, the primary care physician, and how they respond to somebody who's needing care. But when we look at stigma, there are definitely things that we can do to help remove that stigma. And understanding that there are a whole host of individuals that are coming out of treatment, maybe they're coming out of incarceration, and employment is such a critical point of their recovery. They need a job, they need housing, they need security, and helping individuals navigate that are coming out of incarceration and the justice system. So I mentioned the mental health consultations. Again, it's not prescriptive. We don't go in and tell an employer this is what you need to do. We go in and we talk to employers about what they have available and how they might consider opening up access to care through their plan design. We also, my clicker just stopped, so we'll punt. Oh, there we go. Mental health first aid. Mental health first aid at the employer setting is just a little bit different. We will go in and train supervisors and managers. We also do community mental health first aid trainings. When we talk about the mental health first aid, we have gone into employers, and I'll use Ivy Tech as an example. We trained over 400 managers and supervisors within Ivy Tech on how to identify those that might be struggling with mental health issues and how to access the care. I mentioned the mental health stigma-free toolkit that we have available, and it kind of goes through what mental health is, what substance use is, and all the stigma associated with that, and helping remove some of the barriers that we hear often. We also, I talked about the recovery at work. This is a series of videos that we created with the PACE organization, and PACE really helps individuals find employment. So it's helping individuals that are struggling, that are coming out of incarceration, that don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to tell their story and what it means to translate some of those skills that they don't have into practical opportunities when it comes to employment. How do you interview? How do you fill out an application if you have a felony? How do you tell that story and still get the job? And really talk about your own stigma in that, and understanding that you can remove that stigma, you can put forth your best effort, but to tell the story is to really help employers understand the critical role of employment in those conversations. We have stories of recovery in individuals that are really telling what a job means to them and where they might be if they didn't have that opportunity for a job. And the discrimination that comes in when they go into the employment. Molly's story is amazing when she goes in and she thinks she's going in for an interview, and she goes in and she sits down and the individual says, well, you lied on your application. And we just want you to know that that's why you're not getting a job, and that's why you would never work for a company like us. And, she had gone through the expungement process. She had really felt that she had answered as honestly as she could. She ended up getting a second chance interview with another individual within the same company, and she now is the face of that organization. Again, recovery is possible. It's one of those things that individuals that are hiring, we need them to think differently about this interview process as well. So some of the things that we're really starting to see is from an employer intervention. We want employers to really look at their programs and policies and see what's happening there. They need to be clear, supportive programs, and they need to be really intentional in providing the access that I've talked about. And again, if you have the opportunity to go back and review your benefits and understand what is available from a mental health and substance use standpoint within your plan, that would be fantastic, because a lot of employers don't understand that. The second part of that is doing that supportive work environment. What does that mean when it comes to helping an individual reduce their own stigma and reduce the stigma around substance use and mental health in the workplace? Training and education is so important that they can really understand what's available to them. They can understand that they have tools and resources that are available. We can train the supervisors and the managers to really support and access the care that they need. Preventative strategies, how do we use non-opioid, treatments? Do you offer chiropractic care? Do you offer just a limited number of physical therapy visits? How do we expand those preventative strategies so that we're not looking at things that might result in an addiction? And then when we look at the economic impact in the recovery support system, there is so much that we can do to really allow individuals to show up to be their best selves. And if an individual has that opportunity on a health plan standpoint, it will be less of an impact. That if they can show up, to Dr. Evans, the idea of recruitment and retention, if we can help individuals get in recovery and stay in recovery, we can help with their retention. And they become very loyal employees, very loyal. But I also thought that I would end today really sharing some emerging themes that we're seeing from an employer standpoint. I can tell you that every conversation we have, it's mental health. Mental health and engagement. That's what they're looking for. So how do we get more upstream? How do we get ourselves, instead of reacting to all of these situations, how do we get ourselves into more of a prevention stance? Social determinants of health, employers need to understand that social determinants of health are something that they have influence over. We ask employers a lot, are they looking at where their employees go home to? Because if they're going home, they could be going home into a healthcare desert. They could be going into a food desert. They could be going where broadband isn't available to them. They could be going into an environment that's just not healthy, and or a community that's not healthy. So we're asking employers to think around where are their individuals going home to, and what can they do to potentially support the housing, transportation, food insecurities that we're seeing. Community well-being. Again, I talked about we have to have healthy communities in order to have healthy citizens. And we're starting to see more work being done around that. Staying employee-centric and understanding that one program is really good for one person, that these overarching programs they're good, but it might not help that individual that's looking for something very specific. So one program for one individual is really where we want to get, and to be able to connect that. Using peers in the workplace, peers as a strategy to support those that are really trying to stay in the workforce and really do their part, to have that opportunity to bring peers on site would be something that we would really encourage employers to do. Artificial intelligence when it comes to mental health and substance use, and where does that fit? Digital health works great, telehealth works great if you can have a connection. I was just watching the news this morning, and the person was standing outside with their phone trying to get connection to, they have one bar in Arlington, Indiana, which is down in around my hometown. It's an issue, and it works when it works, but sometimes it doesn't. The other things that we're seeing from an emerging theme standpoint, is really direct primary care, direct surgery, and how employers are accessing health care. Family forming policies are how do we keep women in the workforce? How do we keep families supported? We know that there are a lot of dynamics that work there. The need for a flexible work environment. We still are coming out of the pandemic, and we're still, we've been out of the pandemic for many years, but we're still seeing the repercussions of what does it mean on the workplace and the work environment. And employers are really concerned about their pharmacy spend, and how do they manage their pharmacy spend in a different way. So just some thoughts around what employers are thinking about right now and what we're doing. But again, as employers, we really want them to understand that they have a role. They have a role in individual health, and we really want them to support those individuals to the best of their ability. And at the end of the day, we want employers to be able to allow their employees to show up to their best selves every day at work. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thanks. Questions for Jennifer?
Can I make another speech, Doug?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Question,
Jennifer,
non-question?
thanks a lot. You started in 2017, right?
I did.
Yeah, well, 2017 was the year that this commission met with your predecessors and gave you a bear hug, and you returned it, and it was a new idea to both of us, right?
Yes.
to really do what you're now. So this commission should take some pride in the fact that everything she just described was enthusiastically embraced on the chamber side and encouraged on the governmental side right after this group became a commission. I was on the board of the chamber at the time, and to make the leap from being an employer to being an employer accountable for a whole lot of stuff required thought. The first reaction was, well, how do we pay for it, right? Got over that pretty quickly, but it wouldn't have happened without your colleagues and Kevin and his successors, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. So since we haven't met since February, I've not had the opportunity to share with this group the positive news we received from the CDC in May. According to provisional data for overdose deaths in 2023, Indiana experienced the second highest decrease in overdose deaths in the nation, an estimated 18% drop over 2022. This is a testament to the collective efforts of countless stakeholders and many of you who are here in the room who've contributed to our comprehensive treatment and recovery infrastructure. And so I am incredibly proud of the progress that we're making, although we have much more work to do. So thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you for your time and attention. Our next meeting will be November 14th at 10 a.m. here at the Indiana State Library History Reference Room, and we'll stand adjourned.